and here's something that you and I know a little bit more about, and actually quite a bit more about. I want to switch topics slightly, and Cindy Sheehan should have been in by now, and I guess we're just waiting patiently. Maybe she's just being fashionably late. But the price of gold, $1,200. Who would have thought that as of December 1st we would see $1,200 gold?
Well, I can tell you right now, I've had a huge surge of requests for not people selling silver and gold at these prices, but for buying silver and gold. So I can tell you with all truthfulness, I am seeing a whole new field of people entering the silver market, not only dying, begging, pleading to buy in at these, well, some people would say elevated prices, but for people that aren't familiar with, you know, silver at $8 an ounce, to them, this is just an opportunity to buy.
Right. And I saw someone on Craigslist. They own a coin shop here in Vegas, and they're paying. They said they're paying over spot.
That's pretty normal, though. When you're buying silver, you're buying for usually $1 to $2 over spot if you're getting a good deal. Sometimes when you're buying silver eagles, you're buying for $3 to $4 over spot. So it's typical to buy over spot. But what concerns me and what's interesting is how the whole dynamics are changing with the metals market. Everyone that's in metals is probably thinking silver's high, gold is high, and you really have to challenge yourself on what you think is high as far as price levels. Because if you've watched Mark Dice in any of his videos about, you know, he goes out and tries to give... I was
just going to ask you if you saw his last one that he put out yesterday.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He tries to go out and give away gold, and he just demonstrates how much of the public doesn't know. I mean, people thought it was $17 for an ounce of gold. They thought it was $200 for an ounce of gold. And
someone said 38 cents.
You know, it just shows you where we're at right now with the whole concept of inflation. Most of America hasn't woken up to it. So, that being the case, so much more do you have the opportunity to get prepared before the crap really hits the fan. I'm almost, I mean, right now I can almost guarantee you 100% you should start saving copper pennies. I believe it's 1983 and previous pennies. 1981 and
81 and older.
And older. Those copper pennies are going to be worth, you know, if you have $1,000 worth of those copper pennies, I think there will be a time where they'll be worth $10,000. You know, it'll be exactly what happened to silver, where people are paying right now, you know, 10 times the face, 15 times the face. It'll be the same thing with pennies that are pre-1981. That copper will be bought for 10 times the face.
Yeah, in 82 they decided copper was too expensive, so January 1st, 1982 they minted them with minus copper.
Well, isn't that funny? That's what they always do with the metal coinage. They use a certain type of metal, and then when inflation kicks into a certain degree, they start not using that metal because it becomes too expensive for the amount of money that it's worth on, you know, on a piece of paper, for a lack of a better term. So that's one way that you will prevent from starving during hyperinflation, and people will starve during hyperinflation. They did in the Weimar Republic. I mean, 10 million people starved during the Great Depression, and that wasn't even inflationary. I mean, if you have a bathtub full of coins, you have a good chance of making it through hyperinflation because of the metal content alone.
Right, so what that does is it will afford you some stuff, because once the economy is shut off and we go to a cashless society, whatever you have is what you have, if it's not taken away.
Well,
so for short term, you're going to want to buy up this stuff.
During hyperinflation in Germany, I mean, people were buying combs. They were buying little pieces of plastic. I mean, anything and everything was being hoarded because they were using those items to trade for other items. And food was a luxury.
Right.
So if you have a potato, you're a lot richer than your neighbor.
Oh, exactly. Now, one thing I'm going to be doing here in the next couple weeks is I'm going to try to put in a greenhouse. I want to see how that works. I have a decent-sized backyard.
Well,
nothing huge, but enough for like a 200 square foot
the more you can be
greenhouse.
The more you can be self-sufficient in your food, the better, or have access to people that are self-sufficient and they are willing to trade you that food for something that you have. But one thing I think people overlook during hyperinflation, if you study it, people really discount the access to foreign markets. Meaning, when Germany went through hyperinflation, when Argentina went through hyperinflation, when Yugoslavia went through hyperinflation, the whole world isn't going to go through the same thing at the same time. And if you have connections overseas, that is going to mean the difference between life or death. And many times, that is why immigration happens, is because an economy collapses and people have to leave the country. So I really urge people to abroad, especially have resources. Asia, you just start massaging those interests and those connections, and start just making sure that you have an updated passport. You have somewhere to land if you have to leave the country. I myself, my family has built a house in the Philippines, and all the relatives use it. I know if things get so bad over here, I can at least go over there and I'll have a place to stay and food to eat.
Right. I mean, yeah, you might be living on rambutan and addis, I guess, but hey, that's what grows on the land out there.
Well, you have to do what you have to do, but Americans better really quick. Everyone's talking about getting a job, getting a job. People need to realize that just because you have a job doesn't mean you're going to be safe. If you go to a third world country like Mexico, having a job doesn't mean a whole lot. It means you're barely making a subsistence. As this economy changes from a first world type country to a third world, second world type of country, everyone needs to open their minds and start looking at how do people survive in a third world country. And it's not by going to a typical job. It's basically owning a business or providing a service or a product in the economy that people will pay for. And it's going to be hard for people that have just worked a job or worked at the county or worked at the city for 20 or 30 years. They're not going to be able to adjust. So what those people have to look forward to is just the rest of their years to live in poverty. And that's basically living out of someone's backyard or living in a small flat and subsistence living. Day to day, just enough to eat and enough to survive.
So how's Riverside looking as far as that goes right now?
Right now, we're seeing official numbers, 14-15% unemployment. Actual real employment is probably in the 25 to 30% region.
Wow.
Everyone here is surviving on food stamps and unemployment insurance. Now, as unemployment begins to run out, people are transitioning from unemployment to welfare. So what's happening is slowly a huge segment of our population is being transferred onto government entitlement systems, and the few that are falling through the cracks, I'm detailing on video at my YouTube channels, George with Title, Inflation.us, Inflation.us. They're falling through the cracks, and you're seeing a whole new class of homelessness and homeless families and homeless couples. And they're hitting the streets very similar to the book, I think it's called The Collapse. There's a movie coming out, and it's called The Collapse. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's very similar to that.
I sure haven't.
It's very similar to that movie, and in that movie, a man and a boy are surviving in a post-apocalyptic world, and they're trying to get from Detroit to the coast. And the only thing they have is they have a gun with a few bullets, and they have some canned items, and then they have a shopping cart that's breaking down constantly. And that's what's happening here.
Okay.
That's what's happening here. When people lose everything, they lose their cars, they lose their houses, they lose the motel, they can't afford that anymore, they hit the streets, and then they take a shopping cart, and that shopping cart becomes their home. That shopping cart becomes what they hold all their worldly possessions in. And we're starting...
Unless the police really want to mess with somebody, and then they take the cart away, which which I've seen happen a few times.
Of course, yeah. But, you know, like the reason they got it in the first place, shopping carts are pretty durable and they're easily accessible. So they will get another one and another one. And what's happening is now they're forming packs and groups, and you see them in the corners of shopping centers that they weren't there before. You see them in vacant lots, and they form like almost tribes or groups. There's, you know, they can be 4 individuals. They can be 5 individuals. I've seen one group. This is a new group I've seen, and it's about 15 individuals, and they are living on the dirt in a tribe, a homeless tribe. I might start talking to these guys and interviewing them, but, you know, of course there are people on the fringes. You know, there are people that may have drug problems or alcohol problems, but they were people that could just work a job and survive. And now that there are no jobs, they're the first ones to hit the streets.
So are these homeless people willing to talk to people? I mean, do you have to give them, or do you usually just give them some food or something to get them to talk to you?
Well, I watch them, and they're actually living okay, except for the housing situation. They actually seem to be able to beg and find enough food to survive, and even clothing, and they're actually able to live outdoors because, you know, in Southern California, you know, the climate is mild. It does get pretty cold here at nighttime, but they are actually just adjusting their lifestyle to a point where they can just live outdoors all the time. Now, the main thing I think would be a worrisome for them is, you know, the safety and security factor, because mixed in with this whole group of a class situation that's hitting the streets, you also have kids that are unsupervised. The parents now have to work 2, 3 jobs, and you have a whole new class of kids that are falling out of school. They're driving around, walking the streets, and they're causing a whole bunch of security problems. They're breaking windows in commercial buildings. They're tagging areas. So basically what you're seeing outside of Los Angeles is all the suburbs are starting to become more like Los Angeles. Los Angeles is the closest thing I can see to a third world country, where you have 500,000 people on welfare, and then you have a very rich upper class and very small middle class in you know, certain parts of Los Angeles. And that type of effect is just coming outward to the outward reaches of Southern California.
Now, I had this argument, George, with some people at work before, and I'm under the belief that the New World Order would love to have everyone on a welfare system. So and the selling point would be you don't have to work, but then obviously you have to have something to scan so that you get your monthly entitlements, and whether it's a microchip or whether it's a welfare card, a debit system, or whatever. But they want to control everything that you have, because if you are left basically one step above homelessness or homeless, you're not buying anything you shouldn't be, and you don't have time to complain, because you just, as long as you get your monthly entitlements, you're somewhat satisfied, but you're not starving, so you're not going to complain.
I can't understand the New World Order or the elite or the Illuminati, as people call them. I can't even begin to understand them, because, you know, I realize a strong middle class, a strong middle class entrepreneurial society will increase wealth for everyone, including the elite. But as you and I have seen throughout our lives, and we've probably seen a lot, you know, when you're in an organization or of some sort, you know, the people in power tend to like to control things. And if that means keeping, you know, let's say it's a company and it's a guy that owns a company, you know, just intuitively, he's not really thinking, how can I make my employees the best they can be so they can make me more money? Often the times, the thought process is, how can I keep my employees down so I can pay them the least so I can keep more of the money for myself? And maybe that type of attitude is permeated through the elite right now, where they're thinking, we need to crush the middle class, keep everybody on a third world status, a third world labor force, and that way we can keep a bigger piece of the existing pie.